Okay, so today's video is top 5 watches with Roman Sharf. Thanks for joining me, Roman.
No problem. So Chris comes over, he's like, hey Roman, can you go pick your top 5 watches? I'm like, impossible. So I'm gonna rename the video and I'm gonna say 5 watches I picked to talk about that I would love to have in my collection. Whenever people ask, I know people ask you all the time, hey Chris, give me your top 3 watches, $5,000 or $3,000 or $10,000. It's almost impossible, right? So what we decided to do is just pick up some random watches and we'll tell you, I guess, start from the beginning and tell us why you picked that watch line.
This is the Lange 1 moon phase. This has the Aventurine dial, which is a pretty special dial, as you can tell, with that blue. Picked it as kind of a dressy watch for me, I guess you could say. A little bit on the smaller side, but definitely fits at the wrist.
Well, one thing I'll add about that, this was actually meant to be a ladies' watch, right? They had a diamond bezel version of multiple 37mm Langes, but for the longest time, can't say that I've seen many of them because these are actually pretty rare. But for the longest time, what ended up happening is men actually bought these watches. I've yet to sell one of these to a woman because I think Langes in general is very masculine. Well, since you picked that, I'm going to go into, if you want to talk about exotic stone dials, I picked the Rolex Daytona satellite dial. And I've talked about this numerous times before. Anything with a fancy dial, be it a stone dial, be it a mother of pearl dial, well, mother of pearl probably being the lowest totem pole, but anything with a different type of dial when it comes to Rolex, whether you talk about vintage or modern, and this is that neo vintage, again, the most iconic watch ever made with a satellite dial. The numbers are very, very few in between on these of how many were made. That's why I decided to go with that. What do you got?
Okay, for the diver, I have the AP. This is the Royal Oak offshore. This is the taupe dial, which I feel like this is one of my favorite dials. Of course, the Volcano is my favorite dial, being orange. We just saw that. Otherwise, I would have chosen that for this video. But I feel like the taupe dial is one of the most understated, and I feel like one of the most versatile dials on the Royal Oaks.
I think for me, and I'm going to steal a page out of Adrian's book. Adrian loves this particular iteration of the newer line offshores, and specifically the taupe dial, because this is something that has never existed. And I have to agree with him. I do like sort of that vignette effect where it goes from darker to lighter. Obviously, we have the quick interchange strap systems on the new ones, which is great. But I do agree with you on the taupe dial. When they came out with the first lineup of the new offshores with the interchangeable strap, we can gauge by the fact that this is the one that was most requested and sold for more money than its counterparts. And if you're going to counter with APs, of course, I went a little bit crazier on you. I went with the Audemars Piguet Grand Comp in ceramic skeleton. Minute repeater, perpetual calendar, split-second chronograph, automatic. I mean, this is the Grand Comp of all Grand Comps when it comes to AP, the most complicated watch that they make. And why not have it in an offshore? Offshores are near and dear to my heart. It's what I started with when I was in the industry. And for me, if I'm going to go with an offshore, I'm going to go big or go home. I mean, for
the size, they actually wear it really well, too.
I mean, $750,000, it better wear well, right? But yeah. Again, like I said, if I'm going to go AP, my favorite brand, as you guys know, I'm going to go with the baddest AP that's out there. The only other one I would put us alongside this particular Grand Pomp is its same version, but in a white ceramic. Mm-hmm. That one's over $1 million.
Next piece I went with was the Richard Mille. This is one of the extra flats. This I chose just because of its versatility, just like the AP taupe dial, just because I feel like it can kind of go with anything. You can kind of wear this casually, dress it up, dress it down. What are your thoughts on the extra?
I mean, my thoughts is that this is actually a very large watch, and we talked about Richard Mille being very, very wearable, even at its largest sizes when you get into like the RM32, the big round behemoth. But, for somebody who has a small wrist, and well, the minute you put this on your wrist, it actually doesn't wear as big. It actually fits like a glove.
The curve kind of shape.
And that's the case with all Richard Milles. I mean, theoretically, by numbers, this and this Richard Milles are too big for me to wear. But yet, once you put it on your wrist, it tends to wear. And this is, again, sleeper alert, guys. I told you guys before. There are certain watches out there that are sleepers because we both know that the popular RMs is the K shape that I wear, right? Where the least popular ones are the round ones and these guys. And therefore, they made a lot less of these in the very beginning. They're long gone, long discontinued. They haven't brought them back. The one time they brought it back was when they did the Candy Collection. That one sold out quickly. They made like 15 of them. And, be on the lookout for this because there's not a whole lot of Richard Milles out there under $100,000. And that's really why people tend to gravitate towards these because some of the other ones, they just price themselves out of that range. And, of course, I picked the Richard Mille, and the Richard Mille I picked was the RM30 in white ceramic. And oddly enough, it was a toss-up between this or the Baba Watson in white. Mm-hmm. And I decided to go with this because A, this is ceramic, it's a lot more durable, and it's just a little more bang for your dollar versus the Baba being just a plain Jane watch. It's larger, Not by much, but for me, ultimate summer watch. You money watch, obviously, but at the same token, just aesthetically, me and Adrian had a conversation in the office earlier. Somebody asked on Instagram, the Richard Milles and this, and well, if you don't understand them, it's probably not for you. Because if you're going to try to find horological value out of this, you probably won't unless you get into some of their more complicated
And
pieces.
see, that is one thing too. Before I first started working here, obviously I never saw a Richard Mille in person, and now I'm lucky to see every day pretty much. But I do understand what people are saying, because at first I didn't really get Richard Mille, but the more I handle them, the more I love them.
Well, it's specifically when you get into the stuff that's a bit more complicated, right? And you look at some of the innovation in horology that they have done and achieved over the last only short 20-some years, right? 21 years now. It's pretty amazing what they were able to do, and it's pretty amazing what's going on in the market. It's impossible to get. They're all trading a double, triple, quadruple list for some pieces, and great job. Kudos to them. What do you got for Rolex?
For Rolex, I have the classic Sky Dweller. This is the rose gold version here with the, I would call it, what would you call it though? The Anarch?
No, this is the rhodium dial.
Or the rhodium dial, yes, correct.
You don't have to be fancy. You just call it a gray dial. I mean,
True. But the Sky Dweller is the most complicated Rolex in the lineup, as you guys know, but just good, solid, all-around choice.
It's funny how he said it's the most complicated watch that Rolex makes, being an annual calendar, right? Which is pretty much unreadable, and most people don't even know how to set it, right? You know how many clients have bought these, like, oh, how do I know this thing does something else, how do I set it, right? And you have to actually show it to them how to set it. But 9 out of 10 guys are going to pick Rolex for the fact that it's the most recognizable brand in the world. It's first money watch, you name it. It's a big, gold, pretty Rolex, right? But I'm actually pleasantly surprised that you went with this simply because it's the most complicated. Because when you think of Rolex, you don't think of high horology. So for you to pick this based on the fact that this is the most complicated Rolex out there today, I'm actually pretty impressed with that. I'm going to counter that with my last pick, and that is the 5960 in stainless steel. I talked about these watches being sleepers. I talked about the white dial version of these being sleepers when they're trading around that $30,000, $35,000 price range. Now they're well over in the 60 to 70 price range, depending how complete they are. And specifically, obviously, I went with the black dial because this is the one they produced the least of, i.e. they only did it for a short run, less than a year. The other one they did for 6 years. This one they did for less than a year, hence this trades over $100,000. But if you guys are looking for collectibles, look, if you can name me another annual calendar besides the recent one, the green one that came out prior to this, there is no annual calendar in stainless steel on the bracelet. Steel is always usually reserved for Nautiluses, for Aquanauts, for the sporty Elan. This is the perfect cross between dressy and sporty. And I had a couple of guys that bought these. They've also purchased an additional strap and buckle to dress them up and to dress them down with the bracelet. And then if you're somebody out there that wants to put on a Patek that odds are you won't see another guy wearing the black dial, is certainly the way to go.
For my last choice, I chose typical Chris style watch, kind of under the radar. This is the IWC. This is the Top Gun version. This is the Mark 18. It's limited 750 pieces, and it was in collaboration with the Miramar School.
So it's not the movie Top Gun?
Not the movie, no.
Yeah, guys, a lot of guys, oh, Top Gun. The minute everybody talks about a Top Gun, IWC, any sort of pilot, be it big pilot, whatever it might be, or the Doppelchrono, the first one that came out was the double chrono. I did the split second chronograph, but everybody just automatically thinks Top Gun. It's not. There's an actual school out there that trains these high-end pilots, so best of the best with honors, sir.
And this is a wears really light, and as I mentioned in the last video with Pete, this is kind of like one of those if you know kind of watches. It's like definitely under the radar.
I don't think it's as much under the radar as you make it out to be. First and foremost, with the logo on the dial, not a whole lot of watches out there with logo dials, right? And we all know collectability wise, the minute there's a logo on any dial, specifically Rolex and some other brands, it tends to go up in value. But the Mark line specifically, when I started, I remember the Mark 12. Now we're all the way out to Mark 18. We could probably throw up the original Mark watch up on the screen in comparison to this one, but they've done a lot with this. And for me, it's the PVD case first and foremost, the logo on the dial, the super eligibility of the numbers. You can really read what time it is on this watch between the hands and the numbers. I love what they've done with the strap. They give you this Kevlar material strap, but yet they thought it through so that you don't have those ripped holes effect by stitching in an extra layer of suede leather up at the top. to be able to, so when you buckle this watch, you don't end up ripping a hole in it. It's a NATO strap, but it's a NATO strap on steroids. Most NATO straps out there are
Definitely a military style
cheap,
strap.
flimsy, and so on and so forth. This actually has substance to it if you're able to handle it and feel it. So I don't think it's as much under the radar as you make it out to be, but I definitely agree with the fact that if you know watch. And in terms of military look, there's no question about it. When it comes to pilot watches, I think IWC is it. When it comes to divers watches, I go with Panerai. When it comes to pilot related watches, I go with IWC.
What's on theirs today, by the way?
I got the Richard Mille RM11 Red Quartz. What do you got?
The AP Torb. This one we just got in. Wears really light too, especially for the
So it's
size.
the white ceramic turb that they made. This was a limited edition of actually only 15 pieces that they made. They started that watch with the rose gold with a carbon bezel. The carbon bezel kept getting beat up. They switched it to a ceramic bezel. And then they did the platinum version, and then in between they made that limited edition of 15 pieces, white ceramic. There's something, maybe it's because it's spring, but there's something about white ceramic that just sings to me when it comes to good weather, sunshine. Very Miami watch, not Southampton, Pennsylvania watch for sure. Maybe
sure.
South Carolina for sure.
Yeah, maybe Myrtle Beach, maybe.
Myrtle Beach for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's our choices. Let us know what you think down in the comments. And if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and share.
Thank you
We'll see
guys for
next
tuning in. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
for doing me, Ron.